Mason is a double major in environmental studies and Spanish. Yeah, Spanish. She's graduating in spring of 2024. She's going to use that extra time to complete her Spanish major, including studying abroad in Spain this spring. Yeah. Mason has been on the dean's list in every quarter she's been here at the university. She's also part of the Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity and alum of the UW Oceanography High School Ocean Intern Program. I think she deserves some applause for that. The title of Mason's presentation is Sustainable Communication, Initial Engagement Methods, and Maintenance of Hope. She worked with NOAA's National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Alicia Keefe at NOAA, the West Coast region, was her site supervisor, and Teiko Aoki Marshall at the UW English Department was her faculty advisor. Let's give it up for Mason.
All right, thank you, Sean, for the introduction. I'm going to get started right off by asking you all, when did you first start to care about the environment? Can you remember a specific photo, documentary, maybe a class that really got you to start caring? I want you to think about that throughout the rest of this presentation, as I'm going to be talking a lot about initial engagement. For me, it was this picture by Christina Mittermeier of a starving polar bear. It's the first piece of environmental media that's truly stuck with me to this day. I had a reaction to it, and it's the reason that I'm still here. It's what got me really involved. So as environmentalists, it's kind of hard for us to think that there are people out there who don't really care as much about the environment. And so as educators and communicators, it's our job to make sure that we're studying effective communicative efforts in order to make sure that more people are able to be involved. Which leads me to my research question. I wanted to know not only what is the best way to initially engage someone, but also how do we sustain and maintain that engagement? So I wanted to know if there was kind of a disparity between those answers, and so I was able to do that through my internship this summer with NOAA, the Education and Outreach Department. And so I was able to interview a lot of really great environmental professionals in the field, communicators, educators, faculty. And so from those interviews, I was able to see that there was a large disparity, as my hypothesis suggested, and that not only initial engagement is really important, but also the sustaining of that engagement. And so I was able to ask these people not only about how they were initially engaged, but also why they're still in the field. When I did ask them what their tactics are for engaging people, their audiences, we got a lot of hope, accessibility, readability, a little bit of personal connections, and definitely action items. When I asked them why they themselves are still in the field, I saw that I really only got answers about personal connection and hope. So there's a large gap. Why some people stay in the field, it's not just that initial engagement that's so important, but we really need to focus on the sustaining of that engagement. So through a literary review and through my internship and the interviews that I conducted, I found a sort of dream team of environmental communication methods that are really conducive in order to make sure that people are engaged and educated. So number one, we've got storytelling. Not only educating ourselves on our own narratives, but also other people's narratives is a great way of making sure that we're empathetic people. We know all of the perspectives, which is something really important in this field of environmental studies, just because it's such an interdisciplinary field. Number two, personal connections. Every single interviewee that I talked to talked about a personal connection that they had, whether it was a professor, a mentee, a mentor, and it's the reason that they're continuing their study. Which leads me to number three. This is a very light read by David Wallace Wells. He talks about how climate change will eventually wreak end of food, unbreathable air, permanent economic collapse, a doomsday, heat death, climate plagues, and perpetual war. And so that doesn't really make me feel too good. And I feel like, a lot of times when we hear information like that, we kind of shut off. And so it's important that we are discussing this gravity of the climate crisis, but it's important to also make sure that people get enough hope and optimistic messaging in order to continue their education. So in my interviews with both Oregon State's Marine Studies Initiative as well as Washington Sea Grant and Coos Bay Watershed, I found that especially when our audiences are younger, it's really important that we include that optimistic messaging, especially if there's any negativity sprinkled throughout. Doing this will make sure that people have the confidence to act and make sure that they know that there is a point in doing this. There is a future. which leads me to number 5, multimedia. As environmentalists, we really have to take advantage of creative ways of showing information, even if it's not the most informative. Making sure that people are engaged and, it's got to make more people like penguins, at least maybe relate to some of them. And so, it doesn't always have to be a research article, a talk like this. It can be just a photo. Which leads me to number 6, action items. In my interview with Washington Department of Ecology, I found that including action items is key, of course, especially if the audience is given a plethora of information beforehand. We need to make sure that people know how to act intelligently with this information. So it's not just about this initial engagement, like that polar bear picture. It's about making sure that people are maintaining that engagement and sustaining their love for the environment, which is so important because as educators, we need to make sure that we're educating the new community of people who are going to be eventually our leaders. We need to make sure that they're getting the education that they need in order to make smart decisions, and that they're engaged, because we can make this fun. It doesn't have to be boring. So thank you, everyone. I would like to especially thank my site supervisor, Alicia Keefe, my faculty advisor, Taiko A.P. Marshall, as well as all my interviewees, my family, dogs, and last and also least, my friends for distracting me mostly. But yeah, I would like, if anyone has any questions.
All right, questions for Mason?
Yes.
How do you recommend that environmental organizations and educators use your dream team?
Okay, so she asked, how do I recommend that environmental organizations implement the dream team? I think the most feasible way to do that is probably adding action items to each education and outreach resource. Also making sure that they're available for not only like volunteer opportunities, but like mentorship programs. I know that's not feasible for everyone, but definitely, having enough information and volunteer opportunities to get people involved is definitely very important for educators to do. Yes?
Hi, so do you have any examples of how any projects have applied this dream team strategy, or is this something more cohesive to think about?
So I gathered a lot of the information that I got from the dream team from the interviews that I conducted. So my main focus this summer was definitely like optimistic messaging and hope, and so I found that a lot through not only Coos Bay Watershed, but also like Oregon State and Sea Grant. So it's really cool when they do outreach and education. They make sure that they're focusing primarily on like not only just the facts, but also success stories. They're making sure that their audience is engaged by giving them hope. But yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe one more question? Is there another one out there?
Yes.
Curious what you think about grief, and we've talked a lot about climate grief in, for example, Environment 100. Do you recommend that people try to get in touch with their deeper feelings of grief as a way of engaging? I don't know if you're familiar with this sort of line of work.
If you can repeat.
Yes. Yeah. So Professor Billow asked if, kind of engaging people with that environmental grief is something that we should focus more on, and if is that?
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone should do it, but for people who are feeling grief,
Yeah.
and feeling paralysis because of grief, do you recommend that people try to get in touch with that emotion as a way to push beyond paralysis?
Yes, I think grief is a very, very powerful tool, and anger. I think that it's definitely difficult. We can't, of course, teach everyone how to harness those emotions, but I think, as educators, it's definitely good as the action items that I mentioned. I think it's important that we make sure that people know that they do have a voice, their grief is heard, and that they can do something about it.
Great. Thank you so much.